Russell.
Didn't expect that, did you?
I didn't, but I could talk about Bertrand Russell with you later. The holes you mentioned that you could drive the truck through on the program. I mean, I don't know if you watched it last Saturday. If you thought, any thoughts about how that show went?
The main event was perfectly good fight. And the people who planned it made choices, and they were their choices. They wouldn't be mine. That doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. The holes that I could drive my truck through don't really have so much to do with the presentation, the finances, and the reality that this is a worldwide sport. And you can't own a worldwide sport. I don't care how many investors with more money than brains decide to give you their money to execute a plan that is not economically feasible. Once we get past that hurdle, we have a worldwide sport. I've got fighters every day calling, wanting to know if I'll sign them. I am in business because I took a call from a guy from Russia when nobody else would. There will be opportunities. We will make them. I know how to sell tickets. We'll get through this.
So if it's not economically feasible, why do you think Al Haymon and his investors are, especially Haymon, doing it?
Have you ever been to the Rebel?
I have. Been to your fights at the Rebel.
Okay, so I don't have to explain to you the flaws in that building. Okay, look at it. It was built by people with no experience in the casino business, who had billions of dollars, who decided they were going to do everything differently because they thought their way was good. Decades of experience told every other person in the casino business when they started to build that monstrosity that they were doing everything wrong. And they couldn't stop them. And in the end, building too many rooms in the city, underpricing them because they needed to compete, putting themselves in a hole where they didn't have enough money to complete the building, so that if they sold out every room that was already built out, they still couldn't make a profit. Therefore, they had to underprice the competition even more. Couldn't sell food in the restaurants, couldn't get gamblers in because they dropped the prices so low that everybody who came didn't have money to gamble. I use this as an analogy.
Yeah, let's complete the metaphor. So bring it back to Haymon.
This is my metaphor. People who are not in a given business and have no experience in it, and by that I mean not I know fighters and I can make them fight each other, I can make a match. I'm talking about the experience of the nitty-gritty of running that business. You know, because I'm sure those people at the Revel said, oh, I gamble, I go to casinos, just like people open a restaurant. I eat, I'll open a restaurant. People fail doing this. People with lots of money, very smart, get convinced that their way is better. And I can name 100 examples like the Revel, where somebody with a lot of money should have known better, went out and did something, and created a disaster. They spent billions building that building, and I hear it's being auctioned for something like $10 million. So the problem is, I am sitting on 30-odd years of experience, and I'm telling you, my gut. You ever read the book Blink?
I haven't.
Your gut knows things when you have experience. They've asked people, they talk about in the book, somebody who's an art expert looks at a statue that had been analyzed by scientists and people who carbon dated it and all this stuff to try to figure out how old it was. And they brought in experts, and all the experts looked at it after it was authenticated and said it's a fake. And then they asked the experts, how do you know? And they said, I can't explain how I know, I just know. Well, the experts were right, and the people with all the science and the fancy bells and whistles couldn't figure that out. When you have a body of experience and you have that to draw on, you just know it can't work, and it can't work.
He's been at it, what, almost 15 years?
How many boxing matches has he promoted?
I'm not saying he's done as many as you. You're talking about promoted. You're talking promoted.
His answer is 1. And he's going to do 50 this year, I'm told.
So, on the business side of things, what are the holes that you see, the mistakes that he's making?
Okay. We gotta get through this whole thing. I hate this.
You already answered me that time. Thank you for your time. Sorry, guys.
No, please.
I'm Fred Deck from Canadian Press.
Fred, it's been a while.
Experience tells us that there is, in my view, there is a level at which this could work beautifully. I was trying very hard to get us there. We got us one step of the way there by getting NBC to accept boxing, period. It's like, okay, when you start overpaying for something to the extent that he is, you create a bubble sooner or later. Just like the real estate market. When the prices get too high, sooner or later they're going to burst. And when they do, everybody suffers. Just like the economy in 2008. A bubble was caused by credit default swaps that were, somebody didn't think through. Oh my God, what if somebody cashes them all in at once, okay? Because it seems like a good idea and show your risk. Wow, that's a great idea. Who could argue with that? When they crash all at once, the whole world suffered for it. I'm afraid the boxing world is going to suffer for this. Because when you're paying people a total of $5-6 million in purses, and you go out and you spend I can't tell you how many millions, but it appears there was marketing done in, 20 markets? Something like that. There were billboards and radio ads and TV commercials. And all this money spent, and now you have fighters with expectations. That main event, it was a perfectly good fight. I'm not going to hate on it at all. But there are more competitive opponents out there for Keith Thurman. What's it going to cost to get him to fight one of them? And what's it going to cost when Keith Thurman's really at risk? Meanwhile, you've got to pay for this at some point. So if I did a show on NBC 3 years ago where I paid $150,000, I got $150,000 rights fee, and I had to live in that. I went out, and at my peak of my show in the afternoon on NBC, I had 3.2, 3.1. Is it? They had 4.2. 3.2 million viewers. He went out and spent $8 million, probably, when you add up the purses and all the marketing and the production and everything and the time buy. And he only got 1 million more people to watch than I did. My marketing budget was $5,000 on that.
But in terms of revenue, I mean, obviously the numbers are different, but the fact that if they build it into a brand and have several times that they get ratings like this, could that then bring in the revenue that you all didn't get for a one-off show?
We were getting ratings like this. We got ratings like this.
You had a 3.1 and the next one was a 1.7, but if he has a 4.2 and then continues to build off of that, couldn't the revenue then come on top of that from the sponsors, from the concentrated effort? I'm just being devil's advocate right here.
Fine, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And look, my whole life for the last, 20 years has been trying to figure out how to make that work.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying just because I couldn't do it, it's impossible. What I'm saying is, for what he spent on that show, he sold out all of his time at Super Bowl prices, every single unit at Super Bowl price. Not Super Bowl, I'm sorry. I mean, NFL, regular season NFL prices. Do you think that he could do better than that? Ever?
I don't think he can get NFL prices anyway.
But is there any way he could get more money than NFL prices?
No.
Okay. He sold that out at NFL prices. He will not have raised enough money to pay for that show. Now, he's not going to get NFL prices. If you could get sponsors involved, which is hard. I mean, they only had one. You remember? They only had one.
Yeah.
All the commercials you saw were local avails, except for the one for the beer company.
I wrote that.
You did. So making this leap to if you could find a bunch of sponsors, they're not going to pay NFL prices. We know that. And they're not going to pay much more than they get, for example, wrestling, which gets lower ad rates than anything else in prime time. Now we're breaking this down. We're comparing it to the UFC. UFC's first show did double the ratings that this one did. Okay, it's consistently dropped since then. Their purses for that show was $666,000. We looked it up. The purses for this show came to almost $6 million.
I mean, Abner Maris alone was 1.5, and he was on the post show. You know?
And by the way, what rating did that get? Because I've never heard.
Well, it was on NBC Sports Network. You know the kind of ratings that they get there.
Well, what's interesting that I haven't heard it, which tells me it wasn't higher than anything we did.
Yeah.
And I mean, come on. The math doesn't work.
Is there some other way that it could add up if you create, just hypothetically, 1 million new boxing fans so that when you have a pay-per-view, 500,000 of them buy, whatever. Can you do it that way? Can you do it with an online model, perhaps?
That's a good question. Here's the thing about pay-per-view. When the UFC does a pay-per-view, because that is where they get their revenue.
Right.
Their stuff on TV, if they break even, they're happy. Their revenue comes from pay-per-view. They probably took in $15 million when Ronda Rousey fought the others. They paid her $1 million, I read. That's true. That means they kept, after other expenses, they probably kept at least 10. That $10 million million is money you have now to plow back into your business, to pay for things, to pay your overhead, to make a profit, to pay your investors, okay? When Floyd Mayweather fights on pay-per-view and Manny Pacquiao, they are, look at the two of them, going to walk away with about 80% of the revenue. How much is left? And that's the biggest of all time. On a typical pay-per-view, in boxing in general, of all the revenue brought in on a fight, typically fighters get around between 50 and 60% of all the revenue. The main event fighters, the fighters on the undercard. In the UFC, fighters get 9% of their revenue.
And you're saying revenue, not
Revenue.
just not
Money that comes in.
not profit, because then there's what you
Not
give your
profit.
manager, your promoter, all that.
Not problem. I'm talking about revenue. So that tells me now that if they were to find enough sponsors to cover the cost of their show, well, find their sponsors to cover a reasonable cost, maybe $1 million, that means now all those guys that signed on thinking they were going to get millions, now they're going to be told, oh, you know how we were giving you $2 million to fight? Well, now we're going to give you $200,000. How do you figure that's going to go over with Keith Thurman?
Right. What is the regular NFL ad rate anyway for a 30-second or?
Nicole can tell you all that.
Okay.
She did the math. She figured it out. She's got, the business head. She just got obsessed one night. She started writing in her pad. What are you doing? She made a spreadsheet, But
Sorry about that. You can kick it.
the problem with it is that we have to live in a world in which you have to make a profit at some point, or there's no point in doing this. People with lots of money come in from time to time, and this has been going on since I've been in boxing.
America's Presents, Tournament of Contenders.
Harold Smith
Yeah.
was robbing a bank. He was robbing, did you know that? He was robbing a bank. Okay, the money dried up. The day it dried up, his company, they disappeared from the face of the earth. And it had to dry up. And people say, well, why would a guy do that? There was a guy in a bank inside. It was helping rob. Why were you taking it and spending it like that? Why? Because he could. Because he didn't think it through. Because Bernie Madoff didn't think it through. Smart people with access to lots of money make stupid decisions and get themselves into a hole. And sooner or later, it blows up. And it's going to blow up.
So you've seen this guy maneuver for a while. Does he come off as smart or smarter than those guys you were just talking about?
He's smart. I can't tell you if he's smarter than Bernie Madoff or Harold Smith. I don't know.
Not Bernie Madoff, but I meant the people who did it in the boxing business.
Oh, the people who did Jerry Parenchio, who's a pretty smart guy. He's a very smart guy. You know who he is? He owns Univision. He's a multimillionaire. There are a lot of people who have done this. You can't try this unless you've got a lot of money. Well, if you've got a lot of money, you must be smart and good at something. You must be very smart. It's not about being smart. It's about having experience. Somebody with, again, that book link, you should read it. Those people who came to look at that statue, who had been art appraisers for their whole careers, walked in the room, took one look at it and said, that's a fake, walked out. The people who were smart, the engineers, the people who had all kinds of devices and scientific methods to analyze the statue came to the conclusion it was genuine.
I want to bring it back to one of your fighters. Unless you have any more questions.
Informative discussion, but go ahead.